Order, please. The whip satisfied? Whip satisfied? Recorded vote has been called for on Bill number 61. All those in favor will say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion will call the clerk. The clerk will call the order. Big rush to get this through, I guess. Order, please. All member Cape Breton South.
If the House is in agreement, we can dispense with the roll call if you like, and just call for yea, nay.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 61. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 61, entitled an act to amend Chapter 466 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Theatres and Amusements Act.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. Order, please. Just before we go to the Government House Leader, I did want to bring it to the attention of the House, the pages that are here with us today and who've worked so very hard for us over the last month and a half. We have with us Christopher Dawson, Danny Day, Megan Goodyear, Mike Kent, Brianne Lynch, who's going to be late. I don't think Brianne's here yet. Shay Leon, Evan McDonald, Julie McDonald, Denise McPherson, Zoe Marks, and Ryan Sladen. I asked all the members to give a round of applause for these work. So we've done so great job for us this session. Thank you very much. Thank you. On behalf of all the members, thank you for your great work during this session. Thank you. They're going home for the long weekend, so we thought we'd say goodbye to them. But they won't be here. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah. I almost got drowned there. Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 62, the Financial Measures 2004 Act?
Bill number 62, the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill number 62 be now read a third time.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to make a few remarks on third reading, the last opportunity to address this important bill as it goes through the House. The Financial Measures Act implements the statutory changes required by the budgets, and that makes it a matter of confidence in the government. Defeat of the Financial Measures Act entails defeat of the government. Mr. Speaker, on second reading, I said that the government should not count on every piece of this bill getting through because there were a number of measures that did not belong in that act, that did not entail confidence in the government, and needed to be changed. I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, that between then and now there have been some changes to the bill. Mr. Speaker, in the Law Amendments Committee, at the request of the Minister of Finance, Part 12 of the Financial Measures Act was removed, Mr. Speaker, and that is something that we asked for, the Leader of the Opposition asked for in his speech on second reading, and the government saw the wisdom of that particular request. That's the provision amending the Pension Benefits Act to remove the so-called grow-in benefit, a benefit available to older workers to aid their transition from the workforce to retirement in circumstances where the pension plan is wound up, principally on should it happen that a company is wound up, Mr. Speaker. That is a good thing. There are aspects of grow-in benefits that need to be looked at. We have said that we will be happy to look at those in the future, but doing it the way that was originally proposed by the government was not the right way to do it. I thank the Minister of Finance for agreeing to remove that part of the Financial Measures Act. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to say that between the Law Amendments Committee and Committee of the Whole House, the former Part 17, now renumbered as Part 16, was extensively discussed outside of this House. So although this provision is still in the bill, and it's the one dealing with the 1% across-the-board increase in public service pension contributions, Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that the unions who represent 80% of the contributors, they wish this provision was removed, but they are satisfied that it is a major win for their members that the minister will commit in writing to a speeded-up process towards joint trusteeship, Mr. Speaker, to allow those unions to finally have their place at the table, Mr. Speaker. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, not only that, but the government is going to commit itself in writing.
You got any bridges you want to sell them? Just like the 7-point plan to frame your son. That was word long.
Mr. Speaker, I have to note that I'm being heckled here by the Liberal Party. Now, their finance critic was part and parcel of these discussions. She was with us every step of the way, Mr. Speaker. She has never uttered one word to suggest that what I'm saying has not received the support of the Liberal Party, and if it doesn't, then let her stand up and say it, Mr. Speaker. Let her stand up and say it, instead of having the boys in the back row, Mr. Speaker, as usual, try and play both sides of every issue, and be for the unions, Mr. Speaker, but also be against them, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased, I won't speak for the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that as a result of the suggestions we've made to the government, that the public sector pension plan contributors will now have a stronger voice in the management of that plan, because the government has gone beyond speeding up the timetable towards trusteeship and have also committed themselves to implementing the recommendations that the joint trustees make starting in the next fiscal year, Mr. Speaker, and that is a real improvement for public sector contributors. Mr. Speaker, is this budget or is this Financial Measures Act what we would have done if we were in government, Mr. Speaker? No, of course not. Of course not. There is not enough in this budget dealing with post-secondary education, especially tuition fees. That sector is being starved of funds so that the only recourse that the universities and colleges have is to get more and more money from students, and that, of course, means more and more money from their families, Mr. Speaker. We have to address this issue. There is not enough in this budget about economic development, especially for the reasons noted by the Leader of the Opposition today, especially for the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. There is too great reliance by this government on so-called user fees, Mr. Speaker, user fees that are not truly user fees, but are more in the nature of regressive taxes, and that's regrettable. The government is taking small, very small steps towards addressing one of the priorities of Nova Scotians, which is dealing with waiting times at emergency rooms and in emergency rooms, Mr. Speaker. We still haven't dealt with the issue of home heating fuel. We have an opportunity now to deal with it before the next home heating season, Mr. Speaker, and we do not have a good plan to deal with the top-of-mind issue of Nova Scotians today, which is gas prices. The government came forward with an empty bill, a bill that simply gave them power to do something in the future, Mr. Speaker. That wasn't good enough. We're not about to give the government carte blanche to do whatever it wants without coming back first to this legislature. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognize two things. The first thing is that Nova Scotians do not want an election. They did not want an election. If this budget is defeated, if either the estimates are defeated or the Financial Measures Act is defeated, there would have to be an election starting tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. No, that is not what Nova Scotians want. What Nova Scotians want is for the people that they put in this legislature to make a realistic struggle to work with what the dynamics we've been given, which is minority government, to see if we can make minority government work, Mr. Speaker. It would have been irresponsible for us to launch an election, Mr. Speaker, when it is not what the people in Nova Scotia want. It would have been irresponsible for us to launch an election, Mr. Speaker, when we could not guarantee to the people of Nova Scotia that the end result would be better than what they have now, Mr. Speaker. We could have ended up exactly where we are today. We could have ended up with something worse, a Conservative majority. We could have ended up with something infinitely worse, a Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. It,
The
w-
one
it
thing
is.
we were
It
short
would have
would
been.
not have been an NDP
It
government.
would have been
That's the
irresponsible
one
for us.
guarantee out of it all. There would have been no NDP government.
It would have been irresponsible for us to bring down a government unless we could convince the voters, Mr. Speaker, unless we knew that we could deliver better government to the voters. It would be irresponsible for us to bring down this minority government before we even know if it's going to work, Mr. Speaker.
Probably good for 4 years.
Mr.
Premier,
Speaker,
on that,
the second reason is because we have to recognize what voting against this bill means, because it means more than launching an election tomorrow. Because, Mr. Speaker, I anticipate, using my powers of foresight, I anticipate that the Liberals are going to vote against the Financial Measures Act.
That's how you're going to vote on the Imperial bill.
I won't
Have you
speak.
decided that yet? How do you see the Imperial
I
bill
won't
going
speak
down?
for the member
Tell
from
us
Cape
that.
Breton West, Mr. Speaker. But I foresee the Liberals are going to vote against the Financial Measures Act, and I want to make it clear to this House and to everybody what that means. They are going to vote against repeal of the tax cut, Mr. Speaker. They are voting today for higher taxes for Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, after campaigning in the last election, Mr. Speaker, and relentlessly turning every issue in this House since the election into a tax cut issue. When the government finally listened to them and repealed it, or most of it, they're going to vote for it? No, they're going to vote against it, Mr. Speaker. So it just goes to show, Mr. Speaker, liberal is as liberal does, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's something here that I think has been forgotten that I just want to remind the House of. Voting against this bill means voting against repeal of the MLA pay raise. That means the Liberal Party, if they stand up today against this bill, think that the MLA should get the 43% pay increase, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's fair or reasonable, but Mr. Speaker, apparently the Liberal Party does. Mr. Speaker, let's not forget that. Mr. Speaker, voting against this bill means that that party is voting against tuition agreements for students with special needs, Mr. Speaker, which is in the Financial Measures Act. And I've said to this House before, Mr. Speaker, that two of the most difficult constituency casework situations I've had to deal with in my 3 years here have been precisely that issue. Families whose children could not work and study and succeed in the regular school system. Both of them took advantage of that wonderful Thomas Aquinas Center in Dartmouth, which is about to change ownership but continue the project, Mr. Speaker. Neither of those families could get a tuition agreement, and now, finally, when the government acknowledges that they need to do something about that and allocate some money for it and address that issue, I am going to congratulate the government. The Liberals are going to vote against it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, voting for this bill, and I won't apologize for that to anybody, means that I'm voting to end the odious practice. I'm voting to end the odious practice of charging seniors for their health care costs in long-term care facilities, Mr. Speaker. Under the leadership of the Leader of the Opposition and our health critic, the member for Halifax Needham, we took this issue, Mr. Speaker, which was a priority of the people, and we put it on the political agenda, and we kept it there until the government saw that that was the right thing to do, Mr. Speaker. And they do that in this budget, and Mr. Speaker, they should be congratulated for it. And Mr. Speaker, that is one of the major reasons why I and my party voted to support this budget. Last year before the election, I sat in the kitchen of a woman in the riding of Halifax-Clayton Park Halifax Clayton Park, not my own writing. She called me because she knew as a New Democrat, and she knew this was our issue, Mr. Speaker, and tears ran down her face as she showed me the bills for her husband's long-term care facility, because it was going to take everything that they had, everything that they worked for, and she was beside herself. She didn't know what to do, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, after I vote for this budget, I'm going to be able to go back into the kitchen and say, we said we'd do it, we did it, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals are voting against it. A few days ago, Mr. Speaker, I was in a workplace in my riding, and one of the workers, I was doing some business in this workplace, Mr. Speaker, and one of the workers who I happen to know, and whose mother is in a transitional care bed, looking for a place in a long-term care facility, he came up and said, thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for doing this for me and my family, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to apologize to anybody for saying that I, along with all of my NDP caucus colleagues, fought for that and won that for that man and his mother and their family, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let me say that we are going to support the Financial Measures Act, because we can't support the vote on the estimates and then turn around and vote against the Financial Measures Act, Mr. Speaker. It's an imperfect budget. It's the budget that we were given. It's a budget that delivers on one of our priorities, on one of the people's priorities. It shows, Mr. Speaker, that minority government can work for the people, Mr. Speaker. It shows that working together, that we can achieve a better deal for today's families, Mr. Speaker, and for that, I am proud to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that to begin with, it's important to look at the complexity of government, and I think nobody knows that better than the members sitting across from me, the members who had to craft a budget this time round. It isn't easy, and minority government makes it harder. And it doesn't help when there's a lot of posturing and a lot of partisanship that goes on in this House. And I haven't been a part of that. Now, that's good. Now, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, it is an eye-opener to be here in provincial politics and see how things become obscured and how issues become blanketed with a lot of other nonsense. The basic point here is that this bill is flawed because it is a catch-all bill. Everything is rolled into it. Everything that the government didn't want to debate separately and ad nauseum, probably in their minds, is rolled into this bill. Things that don't belong here are in this bill. So as members of the opposition, we have to look at all of the items in it. We have to consider what it means in terms of the budget. We have to consider what other things have been put in there in which debate is going to be stifled upon. One of the things in particular would be the fact that you've added things like tuition agreements for the special needs schools like the Thomas Aquinas Centre. That's great. That's a wonderful thing. We like that. What about separating the Southwest Regional School Board into two different boards against really their wishes? We heard at-law amendments from both those new boards who have concerns and issues. They certainly have issues. And at the same time, no debate has taken place about their testimony at the law amendments because it's only one of 50 clauses in this bill. 50. So where on earth is the time to properly discuss what the implications are for that part of the province in terms of the governance of their school board? It doesn't exist. And at the same time, they've taken another bill about the government having greater powers to fire CEOs under certain circumstances, rolled that into this Financial Measures Act as well. That means we can't debate the issues and the detail of that. It will become, again, something that will be determined by regulation by the government or cabinet, and we have no say in it. It just gets rolled along with everything else. There are many, many things that are fine in this bill. The idea of freezing the MLA pay, there was never any objection on the part of the Liberal Party or the NDP party for that. but it hasn't had any discussion because it's an area that everybody's uncomfortable with. So let's roll that in there too. It is at least a financial thing, I will give you that. But there's many things in there that could be questioned as whether or not they have anything to do with finance. And yet we look at it as a package, and we're forced to deal with it as a package. Now, as I said, we also, as we discuss this, look at the budget as well, and certainly look at things that were not evident in this year's budget. We see nothing at all for economic development, and particularly for rural economic development. No mention, as we said, of Cape Breton in the entire budget or financial measures. There's nothing there that relates to the difficulties and issues facing Cape Breton as one unique region in this province. Our universities have again been strangled. They've just been kept at the same level. The primary to 12 education sees $1 million extra above and beyond the adjustment for salary changes that are needed. So no new programs, nothing new that we can point to that pulls us out of the morass that we're in right now. Healthcare spending is up, and that's wonderful. We applaud the $230 million, but where's the plan? Even Roy Romano said you need a plan before you pump more money in. And it's great to respond to a knee-jerk reaction that we have to have money in healthcare, but we do need a plan. And I think I speak on behalf of all Nova Scotians when I say if we could see some new improvements, some things that were going forward, like we discussed yesterday, some funding for children with autism, that would be one small component of that extra money. And yet we don't see that. So not everything is as it appears. It is a complex world, and governance is complex. And I understand that government had to make a lot of difficult decisions about what new taxes we'd look at, how we'd raise the revenue to get us to a balanced budget, which I have to say is important to all members of this House. All three parties said they supported balanced budgets, and that is important. Now, it is true that for months from the election onward, we sounded the alarm that we could not afford a tax cut at this time, that it was premature. Not that the intent was not laudable, it was premature. Our finances don't allow for it. There were too many just hopeful, wishful thinking in order to bring that together, and you hope for more money from Ottawa. We hope that there's a new agreement on health or equalization. Well, those things didn't happen, and it was a little bit too precarious to bet the farm on. So at the end of the day, there was a belated realization and recognition on the part of the government that that wasn't going to work, and that you needed a good share of that revenue back into the pot in order to make this balanced budget. So we got $90 million back out of $147 million that was to be given back to taxpayers. But in doing so so late, you've actually had the necessity of clawing back money to make last year's budget balance, to get money in really
please.
taking.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park is the floor.
So although it is the right thing to do, it was still a half measure, and it came late. And the half part is that you're doubling. You're not going forward. You're also taking extra and applying it to last year's budget. That hurts people who are taxpayers in Nova Scotia. And so that I took exception to, and so did members of our party. So we also have introduced a new highest tax bracket rate, which is not competitive with our closest neighbour, New Brunswick. We've introduced more taxes on our corporations, and it's interesting that we've just seen another bill come forward to do with a municipal preferential tax treatment for the Imperial Oil Refinery here in Nova Scotia, with the intent of keeping jobs and trying to I guess, make it better for that one operation here in Nova Scotia to make them more competitive. But at the same time, we've extended the large corporations tax, which means that new investment by big corporations is going to be taxed at a higher level than it previously was. And the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, which represents 1,400 of our largest employers, had spoken very vigorously against that tax, asking the government to withdraw it, that it was supposed to. It had a sunset clause of 2 years ago, and they asked you to withdraw it. Instead, the amount's been increased. Now, those 1,400 companies employ 50,000 Nova Scotians, and if they invest and expand, that's good for our economy. And I might mention that many, in fact, the majority of their members are outside of HRM. They are all over the province. They're in many small and rural and smaller towns and communities in Nova Scotia. And if they are encouraged to invest, you've created jobs. And if there's a penalty or a discouragement, that could be a job killer. So it kind of is an exact opposite of what we looked at with the bill on Imperial Oil. We should be making the place more competitive for business. And there was a recognition, at least in discussing that with Imperial Oil. But again, to digress, that was the wrong mechanism to do it. So we need a plan for economic growth, and we need to sustain some of our other essential services like education, not just health alone. And as I say, it's a difficult situation to look at a 50 clauses that are totally unrelated and come up with the final answer that it's positive or negative. There's a lot to it, a lot more to it than one clause or one item which the member from Halifax Fairview would have you believe. So it isn't a win-lose always in government. I think that there are other people in this House that don't quite see it in the complexity that it has. The grow-in benefits for pensions, for example, has been taken out of the Financial Measures Act, and that may be good if it can be discussed in more detail. But I think of all the items to remove from the Act, that's one that we should be very careful about because, again, at law amendments, we had the opportunity to hear from universities and from groups that represent large employers like the Capital Health District and the health authorities, and they're saying that this is an extra cost to all pension plan contributors. And it's a cost against an eventuality that in many cases is almost impossible. The universities feel they will continue in perpetuity. The health authorities would always have their pension plans continued. Municipalities as well spoke against it. So it's actually creating a burden on a very large number of pension plan members and may in fact jeopardize the continuance of defined benefit plans because it's a big expense on defined benefit plans. Now, I agree it needs more discussion. I'm not sure of the people that might be harmed by that because we haven't had an opportunity. Again, because the mechanism of this act is very limited. We can discuss it, but we cannot amend it. We were told very clearly at law amendments it's not to be treated like other acts. We can't tinker or change wording. We can't just discuss about eliminating clauses.
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. I ask all members to go outside if they must talk. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I said, even though at law amendments with other acts we're able to discuss and amend, and if there's a majority of members at law amendments that feel a certain way, we can make changes. It's not so with this. Even if the 3 members from the Liberal Party and the 3 from the NDP Party chose to amend this act, it would be seen as a non-confidence, I was told by the government. They were not prepared to entertain any amendments to this act. So it was different, and different from the other acts that we've dealt with in that committee. And therefore, we're not able to look for any improvement on any of those 50 clauses. It's a take it or leave it, other than the fact that the government themselves agreed to withdraw the grow-in benefits clause and bring it back later for separate discussion. On the section about superannuation and the 1% increase, we totally agreed that there had been a lack of consultation with plan members. And I believe the government made that admission as well. There should have been greater consultation at an earlier time. It would have prevented a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of, perhaps a lot of the reaction to that 1% increase being included in the budget. I believe the unions themselves had looked at the figures. They understood the need for an increase in the contribution levels, but they would have preferred to see that happen later after the consultation took place. But we understand that the discussions that were held, of which I was invited, and I appreciate that, both the finance critic from the NDP party and myself were able to attend a couple of meetings with the minister and his staff and members of the union to try and see if there was a solution in sight that would try and make up really for the lack of consultation that could have happened in previous months and would have made all the difference. And really I believe that all parties are happy with the idea that you're moving quickly towards joint trusteeship. We agreed with that. And also the talk centered around the fairness issue and whether or not 1% on all workers' salaries was fair because some workers are at a lower level and will pay on all of their earnings. Some are at a higher level and some of their earnings will be exempt from that. So it was just felt that it wasn't a fair rate across the board and that it should be looked at. And we had agreement from the Department of Finance staff that they would examine the fairness issue. So I think that again is a very important step forward because that needs to be heard. When the unions are saying this, they've looked at it, they feel strongly about it, we need to listen. So I think that there was some success there, some movement on that issue, and I believe that there was good consultation, and I was happy to be included in it. Beyond that, there may have been meetings of which I was not a part. I am not aware of that, but perhaps there were further meetings held. But as far as I was involved, certainly the unions were happy with that. Now, what's in the Financial Measures Act and the budget that I might have great concerns about? Well, number one, if we go back to what the Liberal Party had campaigned on and stood for and continues to stand for, was a freezing of user fees. And in the run-up to the election, we had 508 new user fees announced, and a number of those were then incorporated into this Financial Measures Act because, in fact, they're taxes. They're not just user fees. So those are now in that act, and that's a significant increase. In fact, over the last 5 years, we've had a 100% increase in user fees in Nova Scotia over a period of 5, I think, major jumps in different user fees. So that's a concern to us to see that happen again. There's an increase in corporate taxes on financial institutions and on the large corporations. So we're looking at additional revenue of $17.5 million from that, $13 million from user fees. And we had stood firm on the idea of holding the line on personal income tax, just holding it steady, status quo last summer. That didn't happen. It's been adjusted and altered. And in fact, as I said, from July until the end of the year, many taxpayers will be paying double on the amount that they were given as a benefit for the last 6 months. So they'll pay it back and then some. So it's certainly not satisfactory, and it's of concern to us all. Mr. Speaker, there are certainly many elements to this. I'd like to just return to the idea that life is complex, it's not simple. And in this House, there's an attempt often to simplify things, to say it's one issue alone and it's win or take all, win and lose. Well, that's not the way a lot of people do business. And I think that Nova Scotians can understand that there's complexity, that there are more than one item in a 50-clause bill, that there's more than one thing that you hang your hat on. And I think that it's very important that we allow Nova Scotians to understand and not to try and simplify things to the lowest common denominator, and sometimes in this House a very base common denominator, I might add, and that we look at things in their complexity, and we have a level of debate in this House that is really in keeping with the importance of the matters that we're looking at. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize our member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to rise and make a few comments in regards to the Financial Measures Act, especially in light of the commentary that we were subjected to from the member from Halifax Fairview. You know, Mr. Speaker, the fact is, the member from Halifax Fairview talks about a vote of confidence, talks about it triggering an election. A vote for this budget and a vote for this Financial Measures Act is a vote to say that the Premier and his government have been providing the people of Nova Scotia with good government in the past year or in the last 5 years. Now, I'm not surprised to see the Tory members applaud, but it's unfortunate that the NDP do not join them in that applause. Because in essence, voting for the budget and voting for this act is to tell Nova Scotians not only have they gotten good government, but it's the best they could have expected. Or we could also use what the member from Hanseas has been saying on behalf of his NDP colleagues, that it's better than nothing. And that, in essence, is what the NDP have reduced themselves to, is to say it's better than nothing. Whether it be the budget, whether it be Assessment Act, whether it be the Imperial Oil Bill, whether it be the 48-hour notice for gas price increases, it's better than nothing. Mr. Speaker, our party is saying to this government and to this Premier that Nova Scotians expect better, and Nova Scotians certainly deserve better from their government than what they have gotten over the last 5 years and certainly in this budget. Mr. Speaker, keep in mind that from 1999 till 2004, this government has $1 billion in additional yearly revenue than what the previous government had. $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. Yet, is our healthcare system fixed, as the Premier committed that he would do? It certainly isn't. Has our debt stopped growing, as the Premier promised that he would do, and he would not put a burden on our grandchildren or his grandchildren under his tenure? Has the government kept its commitment not to raise taxes? No. Well, between the user fees and the gas tax, that 2 cents a litre, that has taken over $50 million out of the pockets of hard-working Nova Scotians, when the Premier promised he would not do so. Are we to stand in this House and to say This is the best Nova Scotians could expect? Are there provisions in this budget that address some of the concerns of Nova Scotians? There certainly are, and I believe my colleague has pointed them out well. Paying for seniors in long-term care is an important issue. But let me tell you what this budget doesn't do. What does it do for the seniors who want to remain in their own homes, who want to be independent, who want to be around family members, and want to stay in their home as long as they possibly can? Let the NDP come to Richmond County and speak to the young family whose mother now has Alzheimer's. They're a young couple. The wife had to leave work to stay with her mom, and they call and say, what program is out there for allow us to keep mom at home? We don't want to put her in a nursing home. Alzheimer's requires her to be in familiar environments so she can enjoy her quality of life for as long as she can. Putting her in a nursing home is not what's in her best interest. Yet that is what this government is forcing that family to do, and that is what the NDP is giving its support to by their comments here in this House and by their vote. Mr. Speaker, this budget does not say one word for better housing grants for seniors. It does not talk about better home care. It does not talk about in-home support to allow that young family to keep their mother at home, where she belongs and where the government should allow her to remain. That is not in here. So when they talk about seniors, let us keep in mind the hypocrisy of who has been forgotten in their seniors plan. Our party will continue to speak for seniors throughout this province, whether they're in nursing homes or whether they want to remain in their own home. Our party will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, voting for this budget is telling Nova Scotia University students this is the best you could get and this is the best you deserve. No more money to help students with rising tuition costs. No more money to keep tuitions at a reasonable level. Every day we see from the community college, the agricultural college, and every university has increased tuition. Yet are we to say this is good enough and that our students don't deserve better than this? Is this how we're going to move our province forward? Mr. Speaker, we say it's not good enough. The students deserve better. And if the government could stand here and tell us, well, these are tough fiscal times. We don't have as much revenue as we had in 1999. $1 billion, and yet we're supposed to say this is good enough? That is clearly unacceptable. And yet the Premier wants more money. He says, I don't have enough money. He wants more. For health care, a system he said himself as a doctor, health care does not need more money, it needs better management. $600 million later, it is not fixed, Premier, and you want Ottawa to give more money. Yet where is that more money to go? The Minister of Health would have us believe it will go to health. The Minister of Finance, on one day, he agrees with the Health Minister, but then the Premier, in his own statement, when he cut back this ill-fated tax cut, which he knew was a political ploy from day one, he said, the minute Ottawa kicks in more money, I will give you back the tax cut. So that's not money going to health care, Mr. Speaker. That's money going to the Premier's tax scheme, not to help the health of Nova Scotians. For us to vote for this budget and this act is to say, we agree with you, Premier. Obviously, the NDP have once again changed their tax policy and agreed more money from Ottawa should go to tax cuts and not go to health care. That is clearly unacceptable. But let us look at the health care system that the Premier said he would fix. Under his own plan that he sent out to Nova Scotians recently, he says at the current rate, health care will consume the entire provincial budget by 2025. And the Premier acknowledges that. He says, yes. Is that a plan? That's your plan, to consume the entire provincial budget? A Premier who said health care doesn't need more money, it needs better management? We're on a crisis course here, Mr. Speaker. And yet the NDP have chosen not to even acknowledge it. The Conservatives are bragging that their plan isn't working and that unless they continue to get more and more money, health care is going to be in worse state than it is now. At what point are we able to say, and at what point can this government say, if we have this much money, we can manage health care? They cannot say that because they don't even know under their own plan, and as long as they continue to force seniors to have to go into nursing homes, our health care will continue, our costs will continue to rise, and there will be no end of it. Mr. Speaker, there is not one mention in this budget about rural economic development. And how ironic to hear the leader of the NDP stand in his first question to talk about the situation in Cape Breton. If he was serious about the situation in Cape Breton, he would send a strong message to this government. that rural economic development must be a top priority. You can continue citing all the numbers of our youth and of our people who have left not only Cape Breton, but left communities throughout the entire province. Mr. Speaker, the example was given the other day from my colleague from Cape Breton South about the provincial employment program. I hear the member from Hansey saying there was no plan under the Liberal Party. We had over 2,000 students that were being hired for the summer to work in their home communities throughout rural Nova Scotia. This government has gutted that program. It is left now, I believe, there's 600 students from 2,000. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you the situation in Richmond County. Our students go to university, they don't even come back for the summers anymore. We don't even have an opportunity for them to want to put down roots in our community, to take an interest in our community, because they say there's nothing for me. I can't even get a summer job anymore. I have to stay in Halifax, or stay in New Brunswick, or stay in Ontario, or stay in Antigonish. Mr. Speaker, that is unacceptable. A vote for this budget is saying that that's as good as the youth of this province deserve. Mr. Speaker, as I have said, the idea of standing here and saying it's better than nothing, at least it's something. Nova Scotians did not send a minority government here to allow the government to get away with that sort of judgment. It's not going to work and should not work for the budget, the Financial Measures Act, assessment, the 48-hour gas notice, or the Imperial Oil. And I found it interesting how the mayor from Halifax Fairview, in his best impression of Kreskin, could tell us how the Liberal caucus would vote on the budget. I'd be curious if he could tell us how his party will vote on the Imperial Oil bill.
Oh, just wait.
You know, Mr. Speaker, if there's one thing we've seen in this session is the changes of policy that have taken place within that party. And it's ironic to see them lecture us. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all know that the mayor from Halifax Fairview is going through a crisis of conscience in having voted for this budget. And I wish him well in resolving that. I don't assume it's going to be done anytime soon. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, he didn't want to make any apologies for voting for this budget. For what I have just said here and the examples I've given, Mr. Speaker, I make no apologies to his seniors who want to stay in their own homes, to the youth who want to stay in this province and in their rural communities, to rural communities that want to continue to grow economically, or to students who want to have an affordable education and to be able to get the degree they want without having to face insurmountable debt. I do not apologize for standing up for them. Our caucus will continue to stand up for them. This budget is not good enough. Nova Scotians deserve more, and we'll continue to demand more from this Premier and this government on behalf of Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance. We close debate on Bill number 62. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in closing debate on Bill 62, I would like to thank the critics, the finance critics from the NDP and from the Liberals for working together on this. They had some issues to work through, and I certainly appreciate their cooperation as work. Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of Bill 62.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 62. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 62, entitled An Act Respecting Certain Financial Measures.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 74, the Oil Refinery and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act.
Bill number 74, the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I move this bill be now read for third time.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to spend a few moments speaking in third reading on Bill number 74. And I might say at the outset, Mr. Speaker, that this statement here is probably the kind of statement that will make you wonder why this bill is here at all. On broadcast news, May 18th, at 3:41 in the afternoon, Imperial Oil has told a Nova Scotia Legislative Committee that it never specifically asked for a property tax break for its Dartmouth refinery, but it will take one. Now, here we have the ridiculous spectacle of a government interfering in municipal affairs in this province by offering to make life a lot easier for an international conglomerate over in Dartmouth by offering them tax breaks that they didn't even look for. But you know, Mr. Speaker, somebody has cooked a deal here with Imperial Oil and then have come to the legislature with a bill And when I heard the discussion going on in committee, there was nobody there that was really in favor of this bill. The people that were there were saying what a terrible tragedy it is here when the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Affairs will say that the municipal units in this province lack leadership. Those aren't my words, Mr. Speaker. They're the words of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who said that municipal leaders lack leadership. He said that 1 hour ago in this House on another bill. He can shake his head no all he wants. But you look up Hansard and it will say that the minister said there was no leadership at the municipal level in this province. That's what he said, and he can shake his head no all he wants, but Hansard will correct that when he looks it up. Also, Mr. Speaker, why is this bill here? Why is this government meddling in the municipal affairs of this province? The one jurisdiction left in municipalities is property taxation and the ability to tax people for their own needs on the basis of property taxation in this province. They don't have the luxury of all kinds of licenses and fees that they can hike up and call them user fees at any time they want. They don't have the luxury of making a lot of money off of those fees like the government does. They rely on property taxation. Now, here we have a government, Mr. Speaker, we have a government that is trying to do economic development by giving a tax break to an international conglomerate. Instead, I might suggest to the Premier, that he might send Nova Scotia Business Inc. over there to talk to them, because they're doing nothing anyway except bringing the odd call center into the province. Did they try to send Nova Scotia Business Inc. over there? Did they try to send the Department of Economic Development over there to talk to them? No, what they're trying to do is give Nova Scotians the illusion that they want to keep this refinery in Nova Scotia, but they're not doing anything themselves. All they're doing is putting the cost on the Halifax Regional Municipality, who will have to raise taxes to accommodate this somewhere down the road with the revenue they're going to lose. The so-called Office of Economic Development should be involved here. They're not. The only answer to economic development in a situation that, by the way, Mr. Speaker, is unclear as to what kind of trouble Imperial Oil are in. I suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that Imperial Oil aren't in any trouble. Imperial Oil somehow has got the ear of the government for a cheaper tax deal in the future, and that cheaper tax deal, Mr. Speaker, is going to come at the expense of other property taxpayers in HRM. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And what's to stop Imperial Oil in a couple of years' time from coming back again, Mr. Speaker, and saying, well, we hoodwinked them on that one, we got a deal there, now we're still going to leave unless you do something else for us. To hear the minister talk about that, and to hear the government representative, to hear the Premier outside the House earlier and say that they're doing everything they possibly can to keep the refinery in Nova Scotia. Well, Mr. Speaker, the government's doing nothing. The government is putting legislation through that's going to impact negatively on HRM, the Halifax Regional Municipality. The government's not putting any money in there to help Imperial Oil out. They're putting a bill to this House that will impact negatively on the Halifax Regional Municipality. And, Mr. Speaker, I think it's telling, Mr. Speaker, that the NDP's role in this, the NDP, that great socialist party in Nova Scotia, who, whenever it suits them philosophically, will harass the Sobeys of this world, or will harass the Michelins of this world, or will say to big business in this Nova Scotia, this province, that we don't want you, your corporate welfare bums. That's what they've said in the past. Every time there was a development agreement that came here for a big business in Nova Scotia, the NDP criticized it. The NDP never, ever, to my recollection, ever supported a big business deal in this province. What's different here? I'll tell you what's different here, Mr. Speaker. What's different here is politics. There are a couple of NDP members that may be impacted negatively politically if they don't support this bill. So political ideology's gone right out the window in favor of political salvation for a couple of members. The House leader for the NDP said that to the press. At least he was honest with them. Why are you supporting this bill? Well, some of the workers live in my riding. Never mind that the voters and the taxpayers of Halifax Regional Municipality are going to have to pay more taxes in the future. He's going to get a few more votes or save a few more votes in his constituency because he's going to vote for this bill. Never mind politically. Listen, the only the people that I see missing in that caucus today are what I call the most socialist of that party. They're not here. Why aren't they here? Because I think...
Order, please. Order, please. No, order, please. The only member for Cape Breton South knows it's not proper to indicate the absence or presence of members in the House, and I thank him for that, please.
Well, I think that that's been done. I didn't invent that. That's been done here many's a time. But
not today.
I won't bring to the attention of this House that 3 members are missing in the NDP. All I know is that...
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. No, I've ruled not to say it. If the member does it again, I'll ask him to take his place and I'll call for the next speaker. Young member, Cape Breton South.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me continue then and say to this House that I think trying to do economic development on the backs of Halifax Regional Municipality is shameful. This government should be ashamed of itself. They're treading on municipal territory here. The last bastion of independence for municipalities is the right to set property tax rates in their municipality. And now that's been taken away from them, and the wide door has been opened here. The wide door has been opened with the help of the NDP, to every big business that comes to Nova Scotia in the future now has the opportunity to say, you did it for Esso. Why don't you do it for us? And to hear the House leader for the NDP again talk to the press and say, we're protecting the refineries in Nova Scotia. Well, hello, there's only one here. And that one is that one. And that one...
What happened to Ultramar? What happened to Ultramar when you were in government? What happened to Ultramar, Manning? You were the Minister of Economic Development. Talk about the others.
And that one...
Order, please.
There we go, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please, young... Order, please. Order, please. The member, Cape Breton South, has the floor.
Reacted, I mean, the spectacle of a company that's making hundreds of millions of dollars a year about to get a tax break from this government, aided and abetted by the socialists in this province, I think is an affront to democracy in this province and an affront to every taxpayer in Halifax Regional Municipality. Mr. Speaker, Halifax Regional Municipality and its mayor and its council are against this bill. The Cape Breton Regional Municipality are against the intent of this bill. Every single person that came to this House was against this bill. Mr. Speaker, there was not one person that came before law amendments or spoke to me or anybody in our party, or I suggest to you anybody in those parties, except the people who might work there and live in a couple of NDP ridings over there. Other than that, nobody is for this bill. So it tells me, Mr. Speaker, why did the Minister of Energy cook up a deal here with Esso? Because the Minister of Energy was exercised about getting this bill through 2 or 3 weeks ago and said it's absolutely necessary we have to get this bill through. What kind of a deal was made that the socialists, or the so-called socialists, bought into? I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that because the NDP have sent so many mixed messages in the last few weeks in this House that nobody knows what they stand for anymore. And I'll give you a good example of that. A person told me the other day that they had no idea what the NDP stood for anymore in this province. They have 15 members and probably 15...
Order, please. Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. Ask the members to go outside if they have to talk, please. Young member, Cape Breton South, has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Here we have the Halifax Regional Municipality very concerned about this bill. It's municipal jurisdiction. The member behind me there says Peter Kelly, so somebody doesn't like Peter Kelly. Well, I'm going to tell you, Peter Kelly's going to be around a lot longer here than some of these members are going to be here, I'll tell you that. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, and to my knowledge, he's not even a Liberal, Mr. Speaker, but I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, he's looking out for his municipality. When he came here to this legislature and demonstrated the fact that this was his jurisdiction, a municipal jurisdiction, and this government should not be meddling in municipal affairs here, he's absolutely right. He is absolutely right, and his counsel is absolutely right. I think it's shameful that this government can't think up any other way to sit down and talk to ESSO about their problems, if they do have any problems over there with their expansion in the future, but to give them a property tax break that they won't even have to pay for. It'll be the municipal taxpayers on their tax bill. That's who will pay for this break. This government can't even do economic development for a big company like that without resorting to another jurisdiction and really putting it to the taxpayers of HRM. And I think that when the smoke clears on this bill, Mr. Speaker, people are going to realize that this is a bad bill because it opens a very wide door. It opens the door for future companies to come to this government now and say, we're not going to stay here anymore unless you give us a better tax deal. We don't care about the municipality. We don't care if the working man in HRM has to pay more property taxes because of that. We don't care about that. But we're big. We're international. We're making all kinds of money, but we want to make more. You know, here we have a spectacle of the government giving a tax break to a company that's just charging $1 at the pumps right now, $1 per liter for gas, laughing at Nova Scotians, making millions of dollars of profit, and this government is aiding and abetting that by giving them tax breaks. You know, what a joke. Here, are we going to vote for a crowd like that who can't even be entrusted, you know, to go over there and talk to this company about economic development? The easiest way out is the way they always take out. They're doing absolutely nothing in economic development in this province. Absolutely nothing. So they couldn't even do this. They couldn't even sit down and devise another means except to put it on the municipality. Now, I don't know why, other than political reasons, the NDP would support this bill. Now, because I'm anxious to hear the NDP get up and give us reasons, give Nova Scotians reasons. I challenge them to get up and give Nova Scotia reasons why they are supporting an international company like ESSO, other than the obvious political reason that they're trying to save some votes in their ridings. And to the heck with the rest of Halifax Regional Municipality, or by extension, Mr. Speaker, the heck with Nova Scotians. You know, because if that door is open here in Halifax Regional Municipality, it'll be open right across this province. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take my place in a few moments, but before I do, I'm challenging the Socialists to tell this House and tell Nova Scotians why their socialist values have been thrown out the window in favor of supporting an international company like ESSO, who are making millions of dollars in this province and are laughing at this government for coming forward with a tax break for them. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to hear the answer to that from the NDP. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Preston.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've got to speak on this bill as well. We've already seen the Assessment Act passed here this afternoon that's going to add tax burden to every taxpayer in the province of Nova Scotia on the municipal tax bill over time. It's going to put an fair playing field for so many people in the community. Over the 3-year period that's going to be in place before it's reviewed, it's going to be unbelievable. Now we're seeing another refinery bill here to give a big company that, again, is charging $1 a liter for fuel, a tax break at the expense of the property tax owners in the municipality, of Halifax Regional Municipality. That means a senior citizen that lives in Preston, lives in Porters Lake, lives in any other community in the regional municipality is going to be paying taxes to cover the taxes for an oil refinery. I mean, that is outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And it's being supported by the government and their left wing in the NDP. I can't believe this. There's all kinds of tools the government could have used to do proper economic development to help the oil refinery if they needed to stay here, stay here. And I don't think they needed that. They didn't request it. They didn't request this. They only requested to go back to government and say that if they need some kind of assistance in another way, would you consider it? That's all they asked for. But no, the government had to run in and make sure the taxpayers, the property taxpayers in this province and municipality are going to pay extra taxes because the refinery isn't. And it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And again, it's going to go back on the backs of all these members here that represent the regional municipality when they go talk to the residents in their communities and wonder why their property taxes have gone so high and the services aren't there, the new sports fields aren't built.
Order, please. The member for Preston has the floor.
The new sports fields aren't built. The road improvements in the core of the city aren't made. There's no more transit there that people are going to have to use because the gasoline prices got so high. There's going to be none of these services available because we're paying taxes to support a refinery. It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And when finally people realize this, they're going to remember this at the polls. I've been talking to people that have called me up that have a really good grasp on what's going on this legislation and fully understand what's going on, probably more than the NDP and the government does, and understand what is happening here. It's shifting the tax burden again from the province with economic development that they're not doing to the municipal taxpayer, the taxpayer that's being overtaxed at the present time because of downloading in other areas, and the millions of dollars they pay in compulsory education, which should come to an end and be totally a provincial responsibility. The province doesn't have enough money to fix the roads, so they're downloading more and more on the municipalities. Soon the property tax burden in the regional municipality is going to be absolutely unbearable, not just for the people that are on fixed incomes and low-income earners. It's going to be for everybody. You're not going to be able to pay your property taxes. If you can't pay your property taxes, homes are going to go for sale, and the real estate market's going to crash. I mean, this could be a serious, serious long-term impact on the municipality. And, you know, some people that have no vision and can't see what this is going to do, I mean, you can tax people so far and for so long, and they can no longer afford to pay. When the day comes that they can't afford to pay anymore, the consequences begin. And those consequences, I don't think, are far away. You see so many things that the municipality needs to do. You see the recreational requirements in the municipality. You see the infrastructure they've got to build. You see the major system they're working now on the sewer treatment system, and the regional plan they're going through, which has some major flaws in it, but at least it's a plan that they're going to put together. And if they do this plan and they find they've got to improve their transit system so people can get around easier and get to work easier without having the high expense of, again, $1 a gallon, and dear knows where that's going to end, that's not going to be possible to do. So it's going to hit them again in their pocketbooks. It's become more and more difficult for people to live in the province and to suffer the tax burden that they're suffering. And the more we download on the taxpayers at the municipal level, on the property taxes, what about the people that have large holdings of woodland in the municipality that are going to be paying Imperial Oil's property taxes? That's what this is. They're going to be paying Imperial Oil's property taxes. And every time you go to the gas pumps, you want to remember that. You're paying their tax. You're paying not only the tax at the pumps, but you're paying it on your property tax. Maybe the municipality should put a little line on their taxes, because we've seen that happen before. You know, Imperial Oil tax imposed by the province of Nova Scotia. Maybe that should go on their tax bill. Probably will, knowing how that the very efficient the municipal people are in HRM. That'd be a very neat line on there. I know a few years ago when I was in council, I had them put in the extra taxes to show where education is and to break down where it is from what they paid to the province compulsory. So maybe that's an extra line in there that every time they play, and maybe they should put underneath there, call their NDP member and call their Conservative member that voted for that when they got to pay their tax bill and it's up. And I guarantee you, you'll get a lot of phone calls, and a lot of very irate people that are paying taxes for things they do not get. We have a big tax debate in the rural areas, and it was the tax structure was all changed because the rural areas were paying too much tax for the service they receive. So we add another 2 cents on the tax rate, which is about $2 million a year, would add about $2 million in the regional municipality. Another 2 cents on the tax rate. Don't sound like a lot. You're paying $1.25 now, roughly, in some areas. So you go up to $1.27. Not a little big increase, but it adds to it. It adds to the tax burden. And then you add all the changes they made in this assessment now, that some people are going to have their assessments frozen, and other ones will climb as they sell properties and stuff. Inequities are going to be all over the place. And it's going to probably affect the municipality in a very negative way. And it's just hard to believe that this is going to happen. It's easy for everyone else to sit here that's going to vote for this thing and say this is a great thing, it's not going to affect anybody. But I guarantee you in 3 to 5 years, they'll remember this conversation, and they'll remember when the people come back to them and tell them we're not going to vote for you anymore, we're not going to support you anymore, because you've done the things to tax us so badly we can't afford to live in our home and keep our home anymore that maybe you've worked your whole life to get. And with those comments, I'll close my debate.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Speaker, I want the opportunity to make a few comments on the record in regards to Bill number 74. I know both of my colleagues have spoken quite extensively in regards to the issue surrounding the Imperial facility, and I want the opportunity to speak a bit more with the LNG provision that is in this bill. Mr. Speaker, again, I want to reiterate the comments I made at Law Amendments. Most Nova Scotians who've been following the LNG debate know that there's a proposal being put forward by Access Northeast Energy to locate a LNG facility in Bear Head, which finds itself in the Point Tupper Industrial Park in Richmond County. Now, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that everyone in the Strait area has been doing their utmost to work with these proponents to try to make sure that any of their concerns that they have can be addressed and that the community support is there for them. I can tell you, you'd be hard-pressed to go and find another community, either in this province or anywhere, as I would suggest to you, that has been more welcoming and more understanding than what the Strait area has been to this company. You only need to look at how other proposals have been welcomed on the eastern seaboard of the U.S., where they've been clearly rejected because of a lack of information, because of a lack of willing to work with the proponents. That is not the case in the Strait area. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important to know, when this provision was put in here, how much consultation took place with either myself, as the member from Richmond, Municipal Council in Richmond County, Municipal Council in Guysborough, the town of Port Hawkesbury, or any of the other Strait area units. There was absolutely none. The minister went to them and said, here's what we're doing. It wasn't what role can you help us play in this? Here's our concern. Here's what we want to do. That just did not happen. The consultation was not there. And I can tell you that Richmond, Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, all the other units are prepared to bend over backwards to help locate that facility in the Strait area. But what they are being told through this bill and what they have said when they came to law amendments, both Richmond and Guysborough, was to say, why are we being excluded as part of this process? Why are we being asked to allow the Cabinet to sit in Halifax, determine what the assessment will be for this facility, and then we'll be told afterwards? Mr. Speaker, that is clearly unacceptable. The municipal units are prepared to do what they can to assist this company. Let's also keep in mind that Richmond County has the lowest industrial tax rate, the second lowest industrial tax rate in Nova Scotia. I believe Kentville may have the actual lowest in the province, last time I checked, but Richmond is second. I believe Richmond, if I'm not mistaken, is up to 3 times lower than what it is here in Halifax. Mr. Speaker, that is because we have a municipal council that has been diligent in doing its best to keep the industrial rates as low as possible to be able to attract new business and new industry to Richmond County. Mr. Speaker, this government should be applauding Richmond County. And they should be working with Richmond Municipal Council to say, we want you as a partner at the table on any of the issues that may be raised by Access Northeast Energy or any other LNG facility. Mr. Speaker, that was not done. This bill does not make them part of this process. There was an amendment brought in at the last minute talking about a 6-month extension for any changes that might take place. That does not address the concerns of the Municipal Council or of the people of the Strait area, that the Cabinet can sit here in Halifax and determine on its own what is going to be the tax rate. Mr. Speaker, if this province is going to start using property assessment as an economic development tool, there needs to be a full and open discussion with all players before that is done. We all know that there are different programs available to the province, whether they be the payroll tax rebate and other initiatives which have been used in the past, which have been used successfully. Why the government has suddenly decided that it's on assessments that they should focus is unclear. It's unclear to the municipal units impacted. And Mr. Speaker, There are ways for this government, even if this bill is unsuccessful, to sit with Access Northeast Energy and negotiate on whatever issues are there. I am sure that if this government were to come forward and to speak to Richmond Municipal Council, Guysborough, myself, the member from Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, and the Strait area members, and say, here's the deal we've made, we need to bring legislation in the fall to confirm our jurisdiction in doing so, I have no doubt that that bill would be supported. That's what should have been done on this bill. Had that been done, we may have different results. But we're left to wonder, again in this case, is it something Access Northeast asked for, or is this just something the government has decided to come up with? We heard the representative from Imperial Oil come before us and say, we did not ask for this bill. We raised our concern with our assessment to the provincial government, the federal government, and then the provincial government called a few weeks later and said, here's the bill we have. That was the specific comments, Mr. Speaker. So clearly that company did not even expect that they were going to have this sort of a break being given. Mr. Speaker, from the minute this bill was tabled, we expressed reservations. We said that we were concerned about where it was going and that unless it was amended significantly, it would probably not receive our support. Mr. Speaker, the mayor from Halifax Atlantic first said this was a good bill. Then the mayor from Halifax Atlantic said this bill should wait till the fall. Then the leader of the NDP said we're going to move forward with the bill. Then the mayor from Halifax Atlantic said, no, we're going to wait till the fall. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians deserve to at least know, if this bill does go forward, why the NDP have suddenly decided that they should support this bill. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you the concern as a member from Richmond. If an LNG facility coming to the Strait area is being told, upon arrival, we will sit in cabinet and negotiate your assessment, I assure you that the existing companies and any future companies will demand the same. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you in Richmond County, 30% of our residents have basic water and sewer. 30%. That's it. Now we're being told that possibly our assessment rates will be even lower and our revenue will be even lower. So is the answer to tell Richmond, well, you had the second lowest industrial rate in the province, and our means of congratulating you is to now force you to raise your assessment rate? Mr. Speaker, that is unacceptable, and that is not what should be done here. There are means. Do we support assisting these companies? No doubt. I've met with Access Northeast Energy a number of times. I look forward to meeting with them again and give my full support to their proposal. But at this point, it's not even clear that they even requested such a thing from the province, yet the bill is thrown before us. And Mr. Speaker, I can say as a critic for energy, when we look at the fact that gas prices are at $1 for self-serve, we hear the leader of the NDP one day say the windfalls should be returned to Nova Scotians. Then the mayor from Halifax Fairview says, well, no, if you return the revenue, that means a cut in programs. What programs do you want to see cut? Then the leader of the NDP says, read the paper, and then the mayor from Halifax Fairview will see his comments himself when he asks, what programs do we want to see cut if we give back that revenue? Then his leader says, we should give back the revenue. Mr. Speaker, when I heard the leader of the NDP, I had to look quickly at him because at first I thought I was looking at the SO Tiger, but apparently, Mr. Speaker, that was not the case. But Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, Nova Scotians are paying $1 at the pumps in this province. This government has failed to do anything to relieve the pressure on Nova Scotia families, on poor Nova Scotians, on seniors who are looking for relief. The NDP at first said the 48-hour notice was a good plan. Then suddenly they decided it wasn't such a good plan. Mr. Speaker, for us here today to leave this House and say we have done nothing as legislators to provide immediate relief to Nova Scotia drivers, but Nova Scotians, rest assured, we have given a sweetheart deal to the Imperial Oil Refinery, I think would be a disservice to all Nova Scotians. And I have a hard time believing how members such as the member from Colchester Musquodoboit Valley can go see the truckers in his riding and say, I couldn't get you a break on the gas price, but guess what? We saved the oil refinery in Dartmouth by giving them your tax dollars that you pay on municipal taxes. I'd be curious to see how that conversation goes with that member who he himself said that his own party's plan was unacceptable for Nova Scotians. So at the end of the day, that's why we have said this bill is not worthy of support at this time. If we are going to use municipal assessment as an economic development tool, let us bring in the municipal players and inform them of how it will take place. And it's absolutely impossible to allow us as legislators for us to say Cabinet should make this decision. In fact, the leader of the NDP said he would not support the 48-hour notice in the gas bill because he did not want to give the Cabinet the regulatory powers. If that was the case for the gas bill, I urge him to use the same logic for this bill. Do not allow the Cabinet to make sweetheart deals in the back rooms when the municipal units are left out in the cold. Municipalities deserve better. Whether the NDP cares about municipal councils anymore, that's their choice. Let them at least remember the residents who live in those ridings, who pay their property taxes and who deserve to be part of the discussion that's taken place here and not be the victims of deals being cooked up here in Halifax without their approval, without even their knowledge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to take a long time on this. I couldn't help but noticing that the three people who the Liberals put up to speak on this were the three ministers from one of the most discredited governments in the history of this province. Right? They were three ministers, Mr. Speaker, three ministers who didn't care about municipal councils at all. When they brought forward in the amalgamation bill, when they brought forward service exchange, they didn't care. It was going to bankrupt. It was going to bankrupt the county of Halifax. They didn't care about the councils of Dartmouth, of Halifax, of Bedford. They didn't care, and they didn't consult. They didn't consult. They just went right ahead and they did it. So to have them stand up today, dripping with contradiction, Mr. Speaker, is beyond me. It's beyond me. And let's be clear about what they're saying. Let's be clear about what they're saying. Because they're not saying that they're opposed to giving tax breaks to SO. They're not saying that. No, they're saying that they just don't want to use this mechanism. They want to use some other mechanism. And they're saying and what really gets them, Mr. Speaker, what really gets them is the possibility. I mean, they don't know how we're going to vote, but the possibility that we might be somehow in favor of addressing an assessment issue. That's what really sends them crazy. Right? Because, Mr. Speaker, if I were to talk about an industry that was located in the member from Cape Breton South riding and the possibility of closing down that industry, he would be outraged, and rightfully so. If I was to talk about what was going on in the member from Richmond's riding, and maybe he's got a beef, the member for Richmond, because I remember being fairly critical of Rainbow Fisheries and their interference in that, and all, and Arenda Recip, and many of the other handouts and boondoggles that they participated in when they were in government, Mr. Speaker. When they were in government, I remember all too well. So, Mr. Speaker, and they come in here and they talk about, we're going to give back 2 cents a liter on gas. They should give back 2 cents a liter. So, in their minds, that instead of 99.9, 97.9's okay. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker? And they say, everything should be on the table. Except regulation, of course. Regulation's bad. That would be a bad thing, right? They have no credibility on this issue. They have no credibility when it comes to talking about the municipal assessment and municipal issues, because they trod all over municipal councils when they had the huge majority in here, when they didn't have to listen to anybody, when they didn't have to listen to amalgamation, service exchange. Yeah, I wasn't around. Well, I got to tell you, I was on Dartmouth City Council at the time. I was there, Mr. Speaker, and I want to tell you something else. Some of those ministers came to Dartmouth City Council, and we said, the city of Dartmouth, it works just fine. Why are you going to do away with it? Why are you going to do away with it? And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, down in the Alderman's room, down underneath of the City Hall in Dartmouth, they sat there and they looked at us and they said, well, you know, Dartmouth does work pretty well. But the polls say that people would be in favor of amalgamation. That's what they told us. And I had to give them credit. They said it right to our face. They said the only reason we're going to do this is because the polls say it will be popular, and we need something because we are so low in the polls right now. We need something to get us up. Well, Mr. Speaker, they went ahead with amalgamation. I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that was the beginning of the end. And they may find themselves in third place now, but they ain't seen nothing yet. Now, Mr. Speaker, this bill, like so many bills that come before the House, do not have two sides. You know, most political issues that come before the House have many sides. They have many sides, Mr. Speaker, and many perspectives. And you know something? In this bill, Mr. Speaker, our members sat down through, you know, I sat here while the member for Cape Breton South spoke. I listened to him, you know. Now, it didn't make much sense, but I listened to him. Now, you know, most of these issues have not one or two sides. They have many, many sides, Mr. Speaker, and this issue is one of those. Because if the member from Cape Breton South is right about anything, he's right about the fact that this is an industry that is located in the city of Dartmouth. And it used to be that we had this one, and we had Ultramar, and there was Gulf in the Strait. And you know something, Mr. Speaker? The Imperial Oil Refinery is the only one that's left. And if you want to talk about security of supply, and you say to yourself, why, you know, what are we going to do when that refinery goes? What are we going to do when that refinery goes? I mean, we're going to be hostage to Irving in New Brunswick. Are we going to do that? Well, that's one perspective on this, Mr. Speaker. That was one perspective, one that was expressed in our caucus. Mr. Speaker, we looked at the bill, and people said, well, what about the assessment issue? What about the fact that this is going to mean a new regime imposed upon the municipality? And that was another discussion that took place in our caucus. People said, well, what about the working people and their families, the people who might be affected by this? That is another perspective that was shared over the course of the debate. And I think what the people of Nova Scotia want to know about the NDP caucus in this debate is that the people, the men and women that they elected to come to this House, did so with every bit of intention to serve them the very best of their ability. Hear, hear. And the people in my caucus who engaged in this debate, they did so, and they are going to be able to vote today on this bill, and they are going to be proud of themselves, Mr. Speaker. That's what they're going to do. Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Holy Alliance.
Thank you.
They're just sucking you guys in, boys. You don't even realize it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a number of interventions on this particular reading of Bill 74 on third reading. Mr. Speaker, some very interesting and important issues are before us here today. One is with regards to the shift in tax policy. The tax on this facility with Bill 74 will see that the tax is changed to be based on the amount charged per barrel on the production and in concert with the capacity of the facility. Now, one of the most interesting things about that, Mr. Speaker, that is a direct intervention on the traditional fair market value approach to tax assessment in this province, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, would be challenged, and I don't mean that in the traditional sense that Beauchesne would refer to, Mr. Speaker, but it would certainly be an issue in question by the leader of the Socialist Party, as well as the member for Halifax-Chebucto, who served in municipal councils on a previous day. They would see that as a complete affront to their responsibility under the Municipal Government Act. And Mr. Speaker, the leader of the NDP made reference to the hypocrisy of certain members in this House. Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, if we'll check the rules of the House, that term in itself is unparliamentary. But let's leave it at that. He's expressed his opinion. Mr. Speaker, the Municipal Government Act, which was brought in 1999 by my colleague, was brought in at the request of all 55 municipal governments in this province. And one of the most interesting and important features of this particular piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, is the 12-month rule. He refers to it as Section 519, so he is aware of it. Mr. Speaker, this particular piece of legislation throws that entire section of the Act out the window. How can he and members of his caucus, or members of the Conservative caucus, the government now, come in and completely oppose something that they had supported on a previous date? I am not making an assumption, Mr. Speaker. I sat in this House when the decision was made, and it was unanimous consent by all three parties to support that 12-month rule. Not one vote of dissension, not even from the Socialist, on that particular issue. They were the ones that went on about consultation, consulting with all the important stakeholders. I heard that word so many times from the NDP caucus, I thought there was a gramophone at the back of the room with a skip on the needle. Mr. Speaker? Well, that's right, Mr. Speaker. Even CDs skipped. And we've heard that, lots of evidence of that in just the last few hours. But, Mr. Speaker, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities come in and they took issue. They took issue with that imposition. What is the purpose of this relationship between the two levels of government if the provincial government at will is going to come in and throw everything out the window that has been negotiated, which has been discussed, which has been agreed to by both parties? I heard the Minister of Justice in question period saying yesterday, to have an agreement, between two parties, you have to have two parties. A joint relationship. And what are they doing here today? They're throwing that out the window. What's the value of the Municipal Government Act that took 2 years in the making, which received the unanimous support of every member in the House that was here at that time, including the now leader of the NDP party? Well, semantics. Mr. Speaker, I sat in on law amendments when the representative from Imperial Esso appeared, and I asked that representative as to who made the first representation. Was it Imperial Esso going to the provincial government? Was it the provincial government going to Imperial Esso? Or was it the municipal government going to the provincial government? Or Esso going to the municipal government? Or who approached who first and for what reasons? And what options were on the table? We don't know. And we didn't get clarity on that, Mr. Speaker. All we got was the fact that Imperial Esso expressed concern to both levels of government. They met, and this is what they agreed on. Well, if it's such a concern about economic development, and we too, we support the need for that refinery in this province. It generates jobs. It generates economic and social security for many families in this province and the community surrounding the refinery. It provides provincial taxes. It provides federal taxes. It provides municipal taxes. But, Mr. Speaker, when you start hitting one of the most regressive tax regimes in the province, which is that on property taxes, and we all know that provincial and federal taxes are rated on a sliding scale. The more you make, the more you pay. The less you make, the less you pay. But municipal taxes, unless you're going to start carving up the system on a piecemeal basis, which is what's been happening here in this session, then if you don't have the money to pay, your property taxes are still there. So why should the individual residents in HRM be disadvantaged? And that's a fair argument. Why should one corporation be given a special treatment? Maybe there are those compelling reasons, as has been referred to or inferred by the individual members. But we haven't seen the full substance of that argument. Why hasn't the provincial government used the economic development tools at its disposal? Is it because politically, Mr. Speaker, it would be unpopular to be seen subsidizing an oil company which is perceived to be gouging the consumers of Nova Scotia while a government does nothing but just waffle? I think it's unfair. You talk about the working families, you talk about the people that need help, the families that are struggling. They don't need a 48-hour notice. They need help. They need relief. And they're not getting it from this government. The member for Dartmouth North would be the first to stand and revel at any government or any member that would bring in such a tax measure that's regressive. And I'm very surprised that he hasn't spoken on this issue. I'm very surprised that the leader of the NDP is the only one that seems to be putting a front on here. That's very concerning, Mr. Speaker. When you see, very concerning for all stakeholders. The member for Hants East thinks this is a funny matter, but it's not. It's not. He says, let's get to the vote. Forget about democracy. Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't say it that way. I don't say it that way, and he may think it's funny. But when people's taxes are going up, when the cost of gasoline is going up, Mr. Speaker, well, if this is what this legislature has come to, well, then I say that's a sad, sad commentary on the principles of responsible government and the democratic process. Is this what this has evolved from after 250 years? Is this what Joseph Howe would say? To listen to that type of diatribe? I don't think so. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious matter. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the representative from Imperial Esso came and he said, we never specifically asked for a tax rebate. Well, why? Why is the Premier and the Minister of Energy and representatives from the provincial government downloading this onto the municipality? They represent, it's unanimous. It's unanimous at Halifax Regional Council. Oh, so the minister's saying it isn't. But he hasn't identified the dissenting vote. Ah, so now we're operating by consensus. Anonymous consensus. That's the way this government is now operating on. He's now calling into question the integrity of the Chief Magistrate for the Halifax Regional Municipality, who speaks for all taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, is it little wonder that public record will show that the relationship between the various levels of government have deteriorated. The record will show, Mr. Speaker, that the level of cooperation between this government and the other two levels of government has deteriorated. In particular, the federal government, more so than anything else. The most substantial decline, according to the latest statistics, in the ability of this government to cooperate with other levels of government is that with the federal government. And now they're going to jump on the provincial government. Maybe they're afraid of the mayor. Maybe they're afraid that he may be the next leader for the Tory party. So this could be a preemptive strike. Maybe they see him as a threat to their philosophical approach to public policy. And this is just one of those measures. Mr. Speaker, I think this is amazing. And why haven't those members stood up? Why aren't they saying anything? Because it will impact. It will impact on Hants County and Colchester County and Cape Breton County and Lunenburg and Queens, and you go on, Mr. Speaker. Cumberland County. We're concerned about the jobs at the refinery. The Premier made that point, how important it was to keep that refinery going today. But what are the other options? Why isn't the provincial government doing something? Why download? Why download? Was it that politically unpopular to come out and be seen as helping one of the big oil giants who have record profits? The only other corporations that make more money than the oil companies are the banks. And they won't even do anything about that. They're the only large institutions in the province that don't pay workers' compensation premiums. Why not? Have they snuggled that far up with the big corporations? And I can't believe the socialists now standing up for big corporations. I remember a day in this House, Mr. Speaker, then they had their own party policy was no corporate donations from large corporations. Mr. Speaker, now they have lost their philosophical identity. They have lost their philosophical identity. You can't even find what their philosophy is when you check on their website. There is no basis, in fact, for what the philosophy of the Provincial Socialist Party in Nova Scotia is. They keep referring to Saskatchewan, they keep referring to Manitoba, and so on. Yes, Saskatchewan. Do you know what the philosophy is, Mr. Speaker, in Saskatchewan? To eradicate every evidence of capitalism that you can find. That's essentially what they say. But they don't say that when they stand up and revel here in the House. But beware, Mr. Speaker, beware. There are some very wise and reasoned people in Nova Scotia who are able to define what a party stands for and what demagoguery is all about. And Mr. Speaker, they will not be fooled. And yes, they want cooperation from all three parties. Yes, they don't want to be running to the polls. And yes, to a whole lot of other things. But they say no to giving special favors to large corporations that can afford to pay when we've got tens of thousands of small families in Nova Scotia that can't afford to buy a grocery order on a regular basis. They can't afford to pay their oil bill, their telephone bill, their light bill. Mr. Speaker, they need help. And what's this government doing? They are now forcing more regressive tax measures on the taxpayers of the Halifax Regional Municipality.
That's right. Drive it to them.
Now, where's the member for Dartmouth North now? Why isn't he standing up for all those that he championed for? What about the member for Halifax Fairview? Where's all this altruism for the common folk? Seems to have vanished. Mr. Speaker?
He's Kreskin now. Predicts the future.
Well, he may think he's Kreskin. He's got a long ways to go. He's got a long ways to go. If the provincial government, and in particular if the Premier, wanted to really do something for Imperial Essol to help maintain those jobs, the question I would ask is, what discussions did the Premier or the Minister of Energy or the Minister of Economic Development have with their federal counterparts? What discussions took place? Can they identify? Was there any collaborative effort like there was in terms of the post-Panamax situation or any other large initiatives? We haven't heard that. Maybe that should have been the economic development approach to this here, because we know, Mr. Speaker, with the new environmental regulations that will require the refinery to upgrade to meet the environmental standards, it will cost money. And yes, we have to be mindful of that. But if we are going to take this approach, then the argument that was put forth by the member for Dartmouth South goes squarely out the window, because we will not be able to meet the environmental objectives that she has put before this House on a number of occasions by doing what we're doing here today. We cannot do it because it's so regressive. It's so regressive, Mr. Speaker. And I'm disappointed because every day, just about, when we're here in question period, what's the theme from this government? It's the federal government's fault. We need more money from the federal government. The federal government didn't do this. The federal government didn't do that. The sun didn't come out today. It's the federal government's fault.
Now there's no leadership at the municipal level.
So, and now the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations are saying that the municipal governments, UNSM, has not been able to provide the leadership required. Well, I dare say that a lot of those municipal politicians will have something to say in the near future. Why didn't the Premier, the Chief Magistrate for this province, go to Ottawa with the Mayor of the Halifax Regional Municipality, representatives from Imperial Esso, and see if some kind of an arrangement could be made to see that all stakeholders were accommodated? If it's that important, why download on the municipal taxpayers? Many who can't afford it.
Jamie, put that back.
Mr. Speaker,
Order, please.
it's obvious that the government,
No member Cape Breton West has the floor.
the government has made up its mind.
Taking that home with you, Jim?
The socialists have compromised on a very important philosophical principle.
Yes, they have.
Which it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Is it that important that they be perceived to be so mainstream that they will compromise on every issue? This is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. It's important, Mr. Speaker, when we've seen what happened with some of the governments over the years, particularly under the Buchanan administration, and maybe going back to the William Harrington administration, and perhaps even further. Some rather very questionable activities under majority governments. And sometimes, I do believe, minority governments do provide the checks and balances on some very fundamental and vital issues and matters of public policy. But this is weak. This is weak-kneed and wrong-headed. And I'm surprised that that's the best that we can get from Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. Telling people as well that, look, you have 2 days, you have 2 full days to go fill up your oil tank or your gas tank, because the price may go up, or it will go up. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've had more calls saying that that was perhaps one of the most simplistic, well, I've heard other adjectives, but I won't use them. Wrong-headed. I'll be kind. Wrong-headed public policy suggestions we've ever heard. And, Mr. Speaker, I would respectfully submit that this is just another piece of evidence of a government willing to make a deal at any cost for power. And they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to do it because there were other options available. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Recognizing the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, the closed debate on Bill number 74. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief. A lot has been said about this bill, both here in the chambers and as well in the media. I'm being encouraged to be brief, but I do want to point out a couple of points as to what this bill will actually do, Mr. Speaker. This bill will level the playing field for a Nova Scotia LNG plant with other jurisdictions in the area, Mr. Speaker. The comments made by the member for Richmond are untrue. Richmond County Council supports this piece of legislation, and they support having a level playing field, Mr. Speaker. I spoke to the mayor, the warden myself, and I spoke to council, Mr. Speaker, and that council is very supportive of this direction. In fact, Mr. Speaker, that council came to us, along with the council for Port Hawkesbury, as well as Guysborough, as well as Mulgrave, came to our caucus and asked us to make sure that we did what we could to level the playing field with other jurisdictions so that LNG plant could be located in their region, Mr. Speaker, and I think that's leadership, and I appreciate them for that. What does this bill do? Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, this bill will limit the tax increases paid by one of the most important parts of our economy, Mr. Speaker. It does not reduce the taxes for Imperial Oil. It limits the increase, Mr. Speaker. That's clear. That's all that it does, Mr. Speaker. It provides that Imperial Oil plant, or any plant like that, a level playing field with its competing jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, in the area. This bill protects 220 jobs, $23 million in payroll. It protects Nova Scotia's supply of fuel, Mr. Speaker. Our government believed it was necessary to do something about this, Mr. Speaker. We couldn't stand by like others did and watch another plant like that, another refinery leave the province. This is our last one, Mr. Speaker. We believed it's important to protect our supply of fuel for the entire province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, I'm glad to move third reading of this bill.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 74. Is the House ready for the question? Quarter code has been called for. Are the whips? Ring the bells till the whips are satisfied. Order, please. The whip satisfied? 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 The recorded vote has been called for on third reading motion of bill number 74. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Morse.
Aye.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Russell.
Yes.
Mr. Ham.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. Christie.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Ms. Bolivar Getson.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
We.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Morash.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. DeWolf.
Yes.
Mr. Dukes.
Yes.
Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Langell.
Yes.
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Chataway.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Aye.
Ms. Massey.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Ms. Maureen McDonald. Mr. Dexter.
No.
Mr. DeVoe.
Yes.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
No.
Mr. Gadet.
No.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Ms. Whalen.
No.
Mr. Colwell.
No.
Mr. Levine.
No.
Mr. Gerald Sampson.
No.
Mr. H.J. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Michelle Sampson.
No.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Ms. Moore.
No.
Mr. Parker.
No.
Ms. Raymond.
No.
Mr. Epstein. Mr. Pye. Mr. Goss.
No.
Mr. David A. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Nay.
Mr. Graham. Mr. Terrio.
No.
Mr. McNeil.
Order, please.
25 in favor, 21 against.
Motion is carried. Clerk. Yes. Read the bill.
Okay. Bill number 74, an act respecting the municipal taxation of oil refineries and liquefied natural gas plants.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps we could recess until 6 o'clock.
We'll recess till 6 p.m.